Hello, I'm Yolanda Nava, and welcome to Do You See What I See? Today we have an extraordinary woman pioneer in broadcasting, Maria Elena Salinas. She has been an anchor on Univision for 3 decades, I believe. We don't want to go too longer than that. And she is also a founder of the National Association of Hispanic Journalists and a philanthropist. She's also in the Hispanic Journalist Hall of Fame. She's had such a spectacular career, and I would really recommend you take a look at her Wikipedia bio because there's too much to include here. But I promise you, if you want to go into a career in broadcast, or if you want to have a fabulous role model, intelligent woman that can help guide your life, you'll want to know more about Maria Elena Salinas. So welcome to Do You See What I See, Maria Elena.
Thank you, Yolanda. It's such a joy to hear your voice, to see you. It's been many, many years, and talking about, people who are pioneers. You are definitely a pioneer for all of us Latinas that are in the news media.
Well, we both started in LA, you on Spanish TV with KMEX, and I started with KMBC in English. And we got to know each other then. And then, you went off to, you worked in Los Angeles, and then you went off to Univision Network in Miami, Florida, where you spent several decades, and your career just keeps escalating and escalating. And we'll talk about that during the question and answer, the question period. But I'm just stunned by what I read, by all of your contributions, by the variety of things that you've done. And so I want to start though with your background. And I know that you had an upbringing in Mexico. You did your first years of schooling there, and then you came to this country. And I remember when I reread your contribution in It's All in the Frijoles, the Book of Latino Virtues, that I was very struck by the way that your parents gave you wisdom. I want you to tell us how that wisdom that you learned from your parents and your family has guided your life and helped you in your career.
Well, I was actually born in Los Angeles, and when I was just 1 year old, we went to live in Mexico and came back when I was 7, almost 8 years old. So I grew up, bilingual, bicultural. I spent the rest of that time in Los Angeles until I moved to Miami for work reasons. But, we're always searching and looking for role models, and we're trying to see who are the people that we learn from. And sometimes we don't stop to think that it really is since your childhood that you begin to gain some of that knowledge that helps you and that defines you. And I think that when I stopped to take a look at that, I realized that everything that I needed to know to turn me into who I am came from my parents. And I guess from sometimes when people come to this country as immigrants, like my parents came here from immigrants, their struggle is such that you learn from them. And I think that's one of the superpowers that we have as Latinas, that we have witnessed our parents struggle. And both my mother and my father were very wise. I mean, my father was a brilliant man, but he was a very humble man. And my mother was also a very humble woman and very kind. And she worked all her life as a seamstress, and he worked different jobs. And, I don't want to get into it too much, but, I found out later on in life that my father, after he passed away, that he had been a priest, which helped me to understand why he was never successful in business. And he just dedicated himself to helping people. But, I think there were some basic things, some lines, you hear things and you don't realize that they get stored in the back of your brain. And I remember, learning from my parents is, don't be a conformist and don't allow yourself to be mediocre, and you never stop learning. And if you can make a difference in people's lives too. Those are just some of the phrases that I remember from them that really helped guide, who I am as a person and as a professional. I was able to use that learning, that knowledge in my profession. I think I applied it every step of the way, and I continue to do that.
Well, it's a good foundation, and our mothers were both in the garment industry, and it's interesting how you do learn so much. And I also love clothes, and good goods, because she worked for a very fine manufacturer, Helga Oppenheimer. But what then took you when you got to Miami? That's a totally different environment, totally different change. Of course, heavily Cuban Hispanic group. And so what led you and guided you in terms of your your choices of stories? Did you get to suggest those? Because you've interviewed presidents, President Clinton and Obama. You've interviewed dictators in Latin America. And one of the people I was fascinated by then and continue to be and would like to get your take on him is Subcomandante Marcos, who was the Zapatista and had many good ideas and ideals for the indigenous people of Chiapas. How did you experience him?
Well, in reality, my move from the local to the network started when I was still in Los Angeles, because for a few years, the network newscast moved from Miami to Los Angeles, and then we were in Orange County in Laguna Niguel. And I think that move from the local to the network was really, one of the biggest changes and biggest challenges of my career, because I felt really that I knew my community well in Los Angeles. I had been there 6 years. I really felt connected with my community. And all of a sudden I was going to have a completely different audience. They weren't just the Mexican Americans from Los Angeles. They were from all over the Latin America and with different idiosyncrasies. So really early on, I began to, realize the diversity within the community that everyone talks about so much. I learned that since the beginning, in idiosyncrasies and language and in customs and culture and their music and their food and everything. And so, I traveled a lot. Also, I traveled to Latin America a lot. I did a lot of preparation to try to understand each one of those communities and where they were coming from, because you have to meet them where they are and you have to understand what brought them to this country and the conditions that they lived in their own country and their experiences in order to be able to cover it. And I covered everything from politics to natural disasters to armed conflicts, and of course, our community here. And it's funny that you should mention Subcomandante Marcos, because that's probably one of my most memorable interviews. It's one of the ones that I've enjoyed the most. And, after I did cover the resurrection into, the revolution or whatever you want to call it during, I think it was 2000. No, it was before that. Yeah. It was 1997, I think is
I think that was it. Yeah.
I think it was in early 1997.
What struck you most?
I covered it in Chiapas first. And then in 2000 was the first time that he was going to come from Chiapas into Mexico City after Vicente Fox won. So we did everything possible to be able to get an interview with him while he was in Mexico City. I mean, it was a long process, but finally we got the interview. I was able to sit down with him for an hour interview. And after I finished, he said, "I'm sorry I made you wait so long. You can continue asking me whatever you want." And as you know, sometimes when you get past the scheduled and questions that you have, so meticulously prepared, and you just begin to have a conversation, some of the best things come out. And I think that's what happened with Subcomandante Marcos, when we started talking about his life in the jungle and how did he get all those communiques if he's in the jungle? Didn't he have electricity? Where did they sleep? Who was his partner? What did they eat? How did they live? And that was very, very, very interesting.
Well, he was a philosopher and a literature professor before he became an advocate, a social justice advocate.
Right. That's what they say. He's never admitted to being the person that they say that he is.
Okay. All right.
He used to stay behind his mask. He wouldn't take off his mask, of course, when he was with us. But one thing that was interesting is that after the interview, when we were walking around just to get some video, to get some B-roll, he told my cameraman, let me carry your camera so I can remember my years as a journalist. So everyone standing there, he was a journalist. Well, he was once a journalist. Let's try to find out, if that's part of this professor's background, to see if it's really that person. He's always been an enigma, and up to this day, we don't really know. We haven't been able to confirm who he is and what he's doing right now. But, one of the things he was able to accomplish with the Zapatista movement was for the women. The women of the Zapatista movement, I think, had the most to gain from that revolution, because they were treated as second-class citizens. Now they had more power. They had more power within the structure of the Zapatista movement, but also were able to gain some rights. Because in the indigenous areas of Mexico City, of the country of Mexico, women's rights are stamped on. Really, they have no rights. I remember reading once that it was worse to kill a cow or steal a cow than to hit a woman or kill a woman. So now a lot of new laws against feminicide in all of Latin America. But before, it was like, you can't take my cows, but if you hit my woman or you kill my woman, it's not as bad as stealing a cow. I mean, that's ridiculous. They need to be treated with respect. And I think that they were able to gain some ground during that revolution. So something came out of it that was positive.
Well, I think we have to have some kind of feminist revolution here to counter what's going on now with the U.S. Supreme Court. We're really mired in a number of problems and issues here in this country. But I was always intrigued by him. So I thank you for that, because it is fascinating. How do you develop those skills and survival out in the jungle and communications and all the rest of it?
And he wanted to be a voice, or at least create a forum for them, because nobody was paying attention. And it also helped some of the other indigenous communities across Latin America. So he figured, if we make some noise and we use some, and we use our weapons and we call attention to this, and this is one way, and he that could do it and could help them organize, he was able to accomplish a lot. So, he's admirable, even though some people say, oh, he's just a rebel. He's just a dirty rebel who doesn't take a bath in the mountains. But no, he made a difference, and he had an impact for so many people that were forgotten and ignored.
Yes, and that's important. There's one thing that this leads me to something else. We really have a very mixed attitude and diplomacy and policy in Latin America, and we don't really seem to understand that their history is very similar to our own. They got the same ideas from France and the French Revolution and democracy and all of the rest of it, and through Simón Bolívar, and so a lot of these I call them social justice movements that have taken place there have been misnomered, and they accuse you of being a communist, because then it's all bad, and so you portray the person in a very negative light. We've seen that happening here in recent years. It's fascinating. I mean, when we look back at that, I really think we need to make some changes in our foreign policy, because we don't seem to understand the differences and nuances, the similarities, the common virtues that people in Mexico and Latin America bring to this country that we used to have and we used to promote and talk about a more perfect union.
Well, Latin America has a long history of abuse, but of survival also, because they were invaded so many times. There were so many efforts to just eliminate them completely, to the indigenous culture. And sometimes when I hear people say that, south of the border, there is a lesser culture. No, it's a strong culture. It's a culture of survival. How do they think that they built everything that they built, way back then? And the United States, unfortunately, also has a really bad history in Latin America. They created some of the situations that now have people, desperate to leave their countries in search of a better life. They supported so many tyrants there. They educated in the School of the Americas so many of the dictators, the ruthless dictators that really were controlling some of these Latin American countries and oppressing so many of the communities there. So I do think that we do bear a responsibility, and it really pains me when I hear people rejecting Latin Americans the way that they do, and not knowing enough about the history to realize that we created a lot of the problems that they have back there, and that we should be more welcoming and more understanding and more empathetic.
Well, I remember a few years ago, I was speaking at a Hispanic, National Hispanic History Month at the local college here, College of the Desert, where I am now. And one of the students, I gave a very honest talk about It's All Through Holdings. We were revisiting that book. And I gave a very honest talk about some of my own experiences as a child. And one of the women in the audience was half Mexican. And she said, I feel shame, for being Mexican, because there's so much negativity. There has been over the decades. It's gotten worse since 2015. But I said to her, you have everything to be proud of, because it is a great civilization, one of the 7 greatest in the world, and the pyramids and everything that happened, and the culture and the language and the virtues and the spirituality, the tremendous spirituality is very powerful. It's interesting because we don't hear enough of that, Maria Elena. And in Spanish, I'm wondering, Spanish television, are those same attitudes that are carried, out in English television also prevalent in the Spanish television business?
No, I think, news is news. Is one thing that I've learned now that I've worked both in Spanish and in English is news. But the focus sometimes is different. I mean, in Spanish language media, we certainly cover anything and everything that affects the Latino community. We cover Latin America quite a bit. I mean, in mainstream media, they rarely cover Latin America unless one American that died in Latin America, It doesn't matter that, 500 Latin Americans died in an incident. It only if they feel that it affects the US. And I think that has to some extent led to this very, ignorance that there is in this country about who our neighbors to the South are. They don't understand our culture. They don't know what they're going through. And, way back then when you and I started in the news, the networks were covering Latin America quite a bit. ABC, CBS, and NBC had bureaus that sometimes were based in Miami, sometimes based in Latin America, where they covered Latin America. But as soon as the Cold War ended, then they closed down those bureaus and never looked south. Now we just, look at Europe, Africa, the rest of the world, but very rarely do we look south unless it's something very negative when it comes to the drug war and when it comes to immigration. And that's usually in a very negative light. So yeah, it's difficult. But, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to be a contributor with ABC now, before with CBS, because I wanted to be able to do some stories about Latinos that were not just immigration, because when they do stories on Latinos, it's usually immigration, border, and the problems at the border. And especially in the last, few years since Trump was in office, in a very negative light. Mm-hmm. And with what I am very proud of working with ABC is that not only am I a contributor, but I'm also a consultant with the Race and Culture Unit. And that allows me the possibility of maybe suggesting stories or suggesting angles. And they've asked me to be a contributing, a consulting producer in some of the coverage that they do. And, they listen to me, and I'm very proud of that. I think, people are beginning to open up their eyes and try to understand that, we're Americans too. And that's what I want to do. I mean, the other day, a young journalist asked me, why do you still do this? I mean, why don't you retire? I'm hoping that she meant, and I said, well, I'm not doing this because I'm trying to rebuild a career. I already had a career. I'm very proud of the career that I had. I closed that cycle when I felt it was necessary to close it. And I think it was the right time to close it. But if there's one thing that I've always had in my mind, is that we have to change hearts and minds. We have to, show this country that we are very much a part of it, a very important part of it, a vital part of this society, and that we have such deep roots here, and we shouldn't be treated as we're foreigners in our own country. I mean, the majority of us are US born, the majority of us are American, and yet we're still treated as foreigners. It doesn't matter that you're a citizen. If you look Hispanic, then they treat you as a foreigner. It doesn't matter that you speak English. If you have any kind of an accent, then your English isn't good enough. So that's part of my mission now as a contributor with ABC News. And I'm happy to see that more and more news outlets are hiring Latinos. And I'm hoping that the next step will be to allow some of those Latinos to cover the types of stories that they know best, because they know their communities.
Well, it's important to do that. I think there's a great misunderstanding. We always are viewed as the great unwashed, the problem, we're the problem population. And it's true that, the majority are. And I was very pleased that you made that point when you have done, some of your interviews, and when you had, analysis of political issues and events, that we have this diversity in the culture. And I don't think a lot of people realize that we're a $2.7 trillion market. We're ready to surpass the economy of France, a nation. And people don't realize that we're contributing people, and it drives me a little bonkers, and I'm not in the news right now, but it does drive me bonkers when I see these things and so much misunderstanding. So I'm with you. It's very important to open people's eyes so that they can see and understand and begin to appreciate the great contributions we've made. I mean, from, going through COVID, good heavens, these people have been the first responders bringing the food to the table. And I love the work of Jose Andres, that started up a food distribution program, well, in Puerto Rico and elsewhere. And then during COVID just came in and has been feeding people right and left. That's an amazing service.
Exactly. I think during COVID, there were thousands of dreamers, for example, that were first responders, whether they were in the medical field, so many undocumented immigrants that were working to feed the country, to keep this country going. If it had not been for the immigrants, whether they were undocumented or not, this country would not have been able to survive, whether food distribution, just the types of services that were needed. They do the types of jobs that can't be done from home, from the comfort of your home on a computer. And they were risking their lives while doing that. When I was at CBS, I was very, happy that we were able to do a show called Pandemia. They actually used the word in Spanish, and it was all of the correspondents and producers and bookers and editors. They were all Latino, from Latino staff, and we were able to do a half-hour special that ended up earning some awards on how Latinos were affected by the pandemic. So, little by little, it was just half an hour, but little by little, we're getting there. We're telling our stories. We're getting our stories out there, and that's a goal of mine.
It is a goal that's a very important one. I'm so proud of you because I saw you on Maria Shriver's Women's Conference in March, and I was just thrilled that you were there because we usually don't have representation there on different programs like that. And of course, she's very intelligent and beautiful and understands the Latino community because she's from she's lived in California and was the wife of the governor. But the points that you were making there were very, very important, about the diversity, about the contributions, about just having you there. It was really wonderful, Maria Elena. It was just, I felt so good about that because that's an important outreach that she made there. And she had some outstanding people, and you were one of them. I think you were one of the best.
Thank you, Yolanda. I really appreciate that. Thanks for listening in and watching that. Yeah, it was special. Maria Shriver is very special. And in that particular session, we were talking about the Latino community and the African American community and how we're affected. And also that was one of the topics there was also aging, right? Yeah. And embracing aging. And she did talk to us about that also. I remember
it was a powerful event.
Yeah, she's great, and she's always been great. I remember since she used to have these amazing conferences annually when she was the First Lady of California, and I wish she would have continued them because there was just so much substance to all the different panels that she would put together, and I think we need that. I think we need that kind of philanthropy. We need that kind of connection. We need to talk to each other. We need to meet each other. We need to understand each other. And we need to blend in and realize that, we're all in this together, even though, we're not on the same boat because some come in yachts and others come in rickety boats, but at the end of the day, someone's swimming, but at the end of the day, we do have to support each other. And the best way to accomplish that is by getting to know each other and understanding what our contributions are, what our concerns are, what our needs are in the different communities, and bring it together. With so much division right now, it hurts me so much. I've never ever seen, and I'm sure you feel the same way, so much division in this country, so much hatred, people to people hatred. And it's very sad. And I can't wait to see how we can come out of this. What can we all do as a nation, as citizens in this country, to contribute to a change of attitude? So
it involves a change of heart. I mean, my heart hurts from some of the things I've seen, the shooting in Uvalde and others. It takes developing compassion. And I think we've lost the way in terms of looking at how we can each individually act. I mean, I love the quote from Joan Baez, the antidote to action is the antidote to despair. And beyond that, it's really digging in, and this is why I love the virtues and reviving that book. I'm going to do a renewed edition. It's all in the Frijoles. because we need to draw from our virtues, the best selves, not the lesser selves.
Right.
And I think that's one of the things that we really have to get through, kind of falling away from religion in its formal way, and perhaps in some of the dogma and practices. But the ideas behind each of these great spiritual traditions is very important, and very there's common ground there. And it's to be a better person. It's to love the Creator. It's to be good and do good. And so I think we learned that in our culture at the time that we were growing up, and that needs to be maintained and revived. And for everybody, we have to come together, like you say, and try to understand each other. And more than anything, love one another. That's one of the cardinal rules of every great spiritual tradition. So we got to get the truth out there. I want to see a white paper from you at ABC. We need one. We haven't had one in decades. And that's something that's very important, I think, to work towards, because we do need to change hearts. And the way you do that is through understanding and through appreciation and through just digging into to try to reach across and understand another human being's situation, walking their moccasins.
Wherever we can. I mean, you have this space now where you're, trying to reach people with different messages from different community, members of our community. I think the media is very powerful, and the media, can also make that difference. Our politicians, if they can agree on anything, maybe could help make the difference. So I think all of us in our different spaces need to be able to take advantage of whatever forum we have, no matter what it is, to help make that change. You mentioned the Uvalde shooting, and I just came back from Uvalde, and I will be going back several times. But it's interesting. I've learned so much about that particular community and how strong they are. And I've been looking into their history, how in 1970, they had a walkout during the civil rights era and the Chicano movement era. And they had a walkout in their school of about almost 600 students from all levels to support a Mexican-American professor. And they walked out for 6 weeks, and they demanded change. And that just shows you that is such a strong community, that now, with what happened right now, with the tragedy that happened, they are able to do that now again and demand change. But that is a community that's 80% Hispanic, and but they have faced so much discrimination in the past, and they have been resilient, and they have rose above that. And I'm sure that they will, do that. That's not going to necessarily ease their pain. I don't think there's anything right now that is going to ease the pain that they have as a community. But hopefully it will lead to some kind of change, so these things don't happen again.
It'll be important to really pursue the restriction on military assault style weapons. There should be a ban. They shouldn't be allowed on the city streets. It's horrific that we have that. There's a difference between a hunting rifle and a handgun and a military style weapon. So that's going to create some movement. I hope people activate, because I always like to say that we're God's hands and feet. It doesn't happen without us moving and doing the changing and taking the effort to make the changes. But that has to change. That has to change. Well, what is coming up next for you? What are your next beyond, you're now at ABC, and what other things are on your bucket list?
Well, I'm hoping to be able to continue collaborating with ABC. We have a lot of stories coming up. I'm always searching for stories to cover that will enlighten this country on who we are and how much we offer. So I'm always searching for that. And, also I'm going to be participating also as a consultant with a new network that was just formed, the Latino Media Network, that is creating audio for audio content for radio, and just bought 18 radio stations in Spanish. And also I want to continue creating content for streaming, and my in the deal that I have with ABC, I'm allowed to do that. So, I'm not going to give up. It's like retirement. What does retirement mean? To me, retirement means not having to go every single day, getting up and putting my heels on. And I only wear makeup when I have to do interviews like yours. Otherwise, no. But, I just want to continue creating and I want to continue growing. And that, circling back now, that was one of the lessons that I learned from my father. Don't be a conformist, and you never stop learning and you never stop growing. So it doesn't matter how old you are, it doesn't matter how much you've already accomplished. There's always something new to learn. There's always something, new to experience and something new to contribute. And so I guess it's full circle for me. I'm still following my parents' footsteps after all these years and listening to their advice and moving forward and always being open to new experiences and new challenges again.
Well, there are many, many challenges that we're facing, and I'm glad that you're going to keep plowing on. I think we have to. I mean, a number of people that I know that are in their 80s are really that have been keeping archives for 50 years on the Chicano movement, on cross-border issues and everything else, and creating a project called Mujeres de las Americas to honor Indigenous women from Canada to the tip of South America. So there are a lot of good initiatives going on that are very positive, and I hope we can, involve you in some of those. You're already ahead of the game on all of this, and we have to keep going.
That people hear it, they don't want to be the best kept secret. You create those incredible initiatives, and then there's a limited amount of people that see it. And just to end, because I know that your time is up now, one of the things that I thought in my thought process throughout, the few years that I thought about, this is time for me to leave Univision, is, we do an incredible job in Spanish language media to inform the Latino community, to empower the Latino community. But after a while, it's almost preaching to the choir. We need to get our stories out there to mainstream America. They need to see us for what we are, a vital part of this country, an integral part of our society. And it would be hard to survive without us in it.
That's absolutely true. And I want to thank you for your amazing contributions, not only to the Latino community, but to the, the greater perspective and broader perspective of, of American television viewers, both in Spanish and English. And I'm grateful for your sliding over to the English language side more now. And that's going to be very powerful. I'm so thankful that you are here. I wish you well, and keep on doing what you're doing.